So here we are. Welcome to our second night of Black Literary Excellence. If you joined us last night, you know that you're in for a major treat tonight. This is our pre-Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation's Legacy Awards reading event. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Melanie Hatter, and I am the new program director for the foundation. I just joined the team last month, and I am thrilled to be here. If you are new to Hurston Wright, let me share a little bit about us. We were founded in 1990 by Rita Golden and Clyde McIlvaine as a safe community where writers could thrive. Our mission is to discover and honor Black writers. On Friday, we will celebrate our 20th Legacy Award ceremony, where we will honor the best of the best in Black literary excellence. And tonight, we create space for some of our exemplary honorees who have been nominated for an award in one of 4 categories: debut fiction, fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. And so tonight, we are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll hear from 7 of our nominees. After our readers are finished, hopefully we'll have some time for questions and answers. So if you are on Facebook or YouTube, either one, just put your questions into the chat function. And so tonight we have our moderator, Donna Eames.
Hi, everyone.
Donna is the author of 2 novels, Donna is the author of 2 novels, Tea by the Sea and River Woman. And I am so excited to have her here tonight to moderate our reading.
Certainly. Hi. Thanks, Melanie, and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the second reading from the honorees. We are certainly in for a treat tonight, so we'll just roll right into it. Our first reader for the evening is Tommye Blount. Tommye is a Legacy Award nominee for poetry for Fantasia for the Man in Blue, which was a finalist for the 2020 National Book Award, the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, Publishing Triangle Thumb Gun Award, Lambda Literary Award in Gay Poetry, and the Julie Silk Award. A Kava Kanem alumnus, Tommye is a graduate of Warren Wilson College's MFA program for writers, and he has received scholarships and fellowships from Kresge Arts in Detroit and Breadloaf Writers Conference. Welcome, Tommye.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you, Hurston Wright, for having me here. It's such an honor to be reading with this esteemed group. Yeah, and thank you, Melanie. And so in 1935, Reuben Stacy, a Black tenant farmer, was murdered by hanging for begging for food and water at the home of Marion Jones. And there's an infamous photograph that was taken of his lynching in 1935 in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So I'll read a poem from my book that's after that photograph. How sweet this great land. The white girl is arrested by joy, or is it hunger? Whatever is there bubbling in her perfect little body, she has been taught to subdue it. Crossed, her arms make an X, like a contract's signature. Her wrist rests against her skirt's pleats. Almost as if I were a lecherous savage and not the co-heir of this moment. My nose brushes the photograph. What must her hands smell like? Not an odd question when I consider the dangers of hunger Ah, yes, there it is. The scent too loud for even history to shush. Sweet relish, sharp chives, crush of dill, sandwiched under her nails. A sandwich some black child's mother made. How sweet this great land of nostalgia, when there were fewer houses than there were trees. Safe. She looks as if she might hum. So happy to be in the cool shade of the man swinging from his branch. So one of the figures that pops up in my collection, Fantasia for the Man in Blue, is one of the iterations of the Man in Blue. There's actually several versions of the Man in Blue in the book. So the title is a sort of misnomer. But one of those is Luther Vandross. And uh, and in 2003, he he designed two gowns for Aretha Franklin's farewell concert. Um, and he was known to design for his background singers, like their flashy outfits with the bedazzled, rhinestones and jeweled, the beautiful outfits, which is gorgeous. Um, and Yeah, and as many of you know, he passed away from a stroke in 2005. Luther dreams of Aretha Franklin's gown. I have forgotten her name, and the name of this trim, gold tremolo at my fingertips, a shimmer, all sun-drunk frill. There is a word more blue than blue, but I can't find it. Here, with this ruched tongue of almost silk, or the impossible leather of an animal I can barely name. Even when she's on the fringe of one note, I want to leave her enough room in the sleeves for her arms to show what a piano is for. I have forgotten what a piano is for. How am I going to sew her neckline? A low plunge to frame her throat, the brown flesh that shields it, yet not forever. It's only skin. And a voice is only a voice to be eventually destroyed and forgotten. How about a shawl as blue as the sky that dapper diva Lucifer fell through when God stole his voice, stripped him of his body, made him legless, but loosened the blue I stroke that is sure to leave me if I should wake. And this will be my last poem. It's pretty self-explanatory. The Hunger of Luther Vandross. Honey, what would a thinner man know of hunger? I mean to be forever, for always in hunger. When my stomach has had enough, when my body goes quiet, I let my mouth take over. It's a calling, this hunger to sing for a love I'm too ashamed to want for myself. So I practice. The pitch has to be right to sing the hunger of other lovers, a take on a take, a rendition no one has heard before. With this voice, I wed the lives of others. A hunger to set the mood. I make them turn the lights off, turn them on. A gift this first instrument of hunger, this tenor. I can feel it in my body, all 300 pounds of me. You're never lonely when you're a man who knows hunger like I do, as big as two men, holding on so tight that you would think there is only one. There are two of me, both of us hungry for the stage. Look at how the spotlight searches for me. They can't keep up. They chant my name, want more of me. Who am I to let them starve? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tommye. And how sweet this great land of nostalgia. Thank you so much for reading. That was lovely. So next up we have Vincent Brown, who is one of the Legacy Award nominees for nonfiction. And he's up for Tacky's Revolt, the story of an Atlantic slave war. Vincent Brown is the Charles Warren Professor of American History and Professor of African and African American Studies at Harvard University. And he's the co-founder of Timestamp Media. His first book, The Reaper's Garden, Death and Power in the World of Atlantic Slavery, was co-winner of the 2009 Merle Curti Award, received the 2009 James A. Raleigh Prize, and the 2008 to 2009 Louise Gottschalk Prize. Welcome, Vincent. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Donna. I very much appreciate that. And I would like to thank Melanie as well, and also to Tommye for that beautiful reading. I'm humbled and honored to be on this panel and to follow his words. I'm going to jump right in with a reading from Tacky's Revolt. That until the basic human rights are equally guaranteed to all without regard to race, this a war. Slaveholders organized their societies to make themselves invulnerable. Their persons were to be beyond violation. In the Americas, this required that white people be held in perpetual awe. Brian Edwards knew that terror was the fundamental rule in governing slave societies, acknowledging, in accordance with the French philosopher Montesquieu, that in countries where slavery is established, the leading principle on which the government is supported is fear, or a sense of that absolute coercive necessity which, leaving no choice of action, supersedes all questions of right. This might as well have been a writ and declaration of war without end. By custom, we treat war as an interruption in the normal course of human affairs. War is an anomaly in the regular order, a disturbance, a break, an aberration. War is also seen as a displacement of violence from one place to another, with formal military forces pursuing the conquest of territory. We commonly assume that lines of battle between warring states constitute the most important theaters of military engagement, and that peace treaties can mark a war's definitive end before another one begins with new causes and different fronts. By contrast, when war becomes a way of life, as in the abundant violence of slave war, there is no border and no final result. Slave war is pervasive and unending, the natural consequence of slavery itself. Servile wars did not arise from the peculiar properties of the people involved, the English or the Creoles or the Coromantese, as writers like Edward Long and Brian Edwards claimed, but as products of the larger processes that had produced their antagonisms. The state of war that enabled Atlantic empires to flourish seemed to be limitless, yet it did follow a discernible course, winding its way through the arteries that connected Europe, Africa, and America. The violence of state-making, territorial acquisition, and strategic competition flowed into the quotidian brutality that typified the social relations of slavery, where the projection of will and the exercise of power were at their most naked and absolute. Skittering aggression joined faraway lands to the most intimate spaces. The people who endured this aggression shifted from place to place, forging new identities and testing uncertain loyalties. One could say this of the British, forged in civil war and combat against their European rivals, or of the Coromontes, molded by the slave trade and a tradition of insurrection, as well as any number of other peoples emerging from that same crucible. In 1760, in Jamaica, these adversaries launched a war that had its beginnings elsewhere, in other times, and did not end in peace. This slave war was part of a vast transatlantic phenomenon, comprising the epic journeys of its combatants, their predecessors in struggle, and those they inspired. But it's hard to see where the story concluded. All of slave war's essential features, rapacious exploitation, racial subjugation, and the proliferation of wars within wars, would continue. The dispersed and downtrodden could not win these wars against empires and their adherents. Even the mighty Haitians, emerging victorious and independent after more than a decade of blood and fire, were hardly able to enjoy their sovereignty, instead suffering invasions, local disruptions, and international insults up to this very day. But military victory isn't the only object of struggle. The abolitionist Frederick Douglass once wrote, "A man without force is without the essential dignity of humanity." As a survivor of American slavery and the US Civil War, Douglass knew that slave rebellion was war, and that however degrading war itself might be, enslaved men and women fought for dignity as much as for territory. In the absence of conquest, they claimed spaces where they could defend their self-respect and made places where their bodies could enjoy just treatment. In 1792, some Jamaican whites riding along a muddy road drove an enslaved man called Montezuma out of their way, spattering him with gobs of muck. It was a casual affront of the kind slaveholders offered to slaves many times a day, but Montezuma would not have it. He had been a man of rank in his own country, and he held property in Jamaica even though he was a slave. Whatever he had been named at birth, and however many monikers he had acquired since, whites complained that Montezuma was remarkable for a lofty spirit. Sullied and angry, he warned his abusers, "You turn Negro out of the path now, but soon Negro will turn you out." A committee investigating sedition took note, worried that this outburst announced an imminent uprising. And perhaps it did, although the members of the committee found no evidence of a coordinated plot. Instead, they rediscovered the never-ending campaign to follow one's course unmolested by enemies. Eventually, Montezuma might have said, everyone would learn. As long as enslaved Africans and their descendants continued to fight, they would never be defeated.
Thanks, Vincent. That was lovely. And I especially love this idea of war as an interruption, a disturbance, and a break. And I think it's just one of those things that, we have to continue to think about today, because, that's exactly how we think about war, because it doesn't really affect so many of us very closely. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Morgan Christie, who is a Legacy Award nominee for fiction for These Bodies. Morgan's work has been nominated for 2 Pushcart Prizes, and her first poetry chapbook, Variations on a Lobster's Tale, won the 2017 Alexander Posey Chapbook Prize. Her most recent poetry chapbook, When They Come, was released by Black Sunflowers Press this year and is featured in the Forward Arts Foundation's National Poetry Day exhibit. She's currently a PhD in English candidate and an SREB State Doctoral Scholars Program Fellow at the University of Louisiana. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you so much. And thank you, Melanie and Vincent. Thank you for that wonderful and powerful reading. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Hurston Wright. It's an honor to even be in this space with all of the fellow nominees and readers tonight. So thank you all. I'm going to be reading 2 excerpts tonight from my collection. As I was writing this this set recognized that dreams had become a very potent reality amongst much of the prose, amongst much of the fiction. And we pull so much power from them in our understanding of ourselves and our histories, our stories, and who and what our bodies are and what they are to us. So I'm going to read two sections that are dream sequences from the collection. The first is from The Panther. Keisha is laying on the conveyor belt at her station, naked. What the hell? She whispers while on her back. There is a Nat Geo magazine next to her head, and a baby panther and a baby zebra on the front cover. She takes notice before she notices him. Mr. Stein runs up and tells her everything will be all right, and takes his hand and places it on her belly button. He smiles at her, and then forces his palm downward into her stomach. The pain is severe. Keisha attempts to push his hand away, but she realizes that she cannot move. Listen carefully, Mr. Stein says. They are going to tell you to push, and you have to resist. Whatever you do, Keisha, do not push. He disappears as quickly as he came, and then her mother and Marquise are there, beside her, standing next to the conveyor. Listen, baby, her mother says. Marquise interrupts. When we say push, wait, and only push when we say push harder, okay? They sound like each other, her mother and her lover. They continue to speak as though they have been possessed by the other. Okay, Marquise repeats himself. Keisha attempts to nod, forgetting she cannot move, and says, all right. Suddenly, music begins to play over the overhead speaker. The song is dead, but it is a song that Keisha knows. Her mother would sometimes play it, If You Don't Know Me By Now, by the Blue Notes. The song is not playing all the way through. Only as if on repeat, the audio player is defective or defiant. The store doors slide open and Mr. Stein has returned. And he says nothing this time. He only stands in the background, but is in Keisha's line of sight. Her mother coaches, breathe, and continues to speak. Keisha cannot hear her over the music. Soon, all she sees are her mother's lips mouthing the same shapes over and over and Marquise nodding. I can't hear you. Keisha yells. Marquise shouts, push. Keisha begins to push and Marquise slaps her belly. And Keisha wants to scream. It hurt more than she expected it to, but instead, she just looks at Mr. Stein. Marquise shouts, push harder. She is still looking at him. He pulls an Oreo cookie from his pocket and crumbles it between his fingers. You have to push harder, Keisha, her mother says loudly, and Marquise agrees. Push from the balls of your feet. Mr. Stein finally speaks. Too late. Marquise leans in close. Put your feet and feel the impulse. You have to push harder. Keisha lifts off her hips and off of the conveyor, and it begins to move. Her mother touches the side of her face. Her hand is cold and hard. Her mother opens her mouth to speak, but Keisha still cannot hear her. She only hears the chorus. Keisha lowers her hips, and the music stops. She blinks, and she finds herself on the track, still naked, in the 7th lane. She begins to run, passing rows of dusty red arena seats. Her mother is waiting at the finish line, holding a clipboard, noting her daughter's form and what needs to be corrected when she crosses the line. Keisha is almost out of track, and her mother's face is clear now. She is neither smiling nor frowning. She is simply waiting. Keisha hears the Blue Notes again, this time coming from the loudspeakers. Her strides slow to the beat. She spins around and starts running the other way. Keisha feels like a runner again, not a daughter of a once hurdler, but a runner. She feels her body kinetic and sweaty, as it once did, and the empty seats begin to fill. The crowd sits with their mouths wide, like stalks of slanted wheat, watching her round body fly by. Somewhere inside, Keisha feels astonishing, not fast or athletic or pregnant, astonishing. All eyes are on her, and her stomach churns again, but it churns and it turns into light. She is glowing. Her stomach is glowing. And maybe there is no baby. Maybe it's just light. But then why would to push? And this second section is a little shorter, and from a second piece called Rayon is a jellyfish, swimming wrathfully in a red ocean thick with purple seaweed and stringy blue rocks that don't know they're supposed to be dense. She looks around for more of her kind in hopes of being a part of a swarm. But swarms don't exist in this ocean. So she continues to swim and search, even though searching is futile. As she swims, she feels a pop come from her lower body. And when she looks back, she sees that one of her tentacles are floating behind her like it belonged there. She keeps swimming. She feels 3 more pops, but doesn't look back. She begins to worry then. If she keeps swimming, all of her tentacles may pop off. But then how will she swim? If she stops swimming, and then her tentacles will cease to fall, but then how will she find the swarm? Even if it is, she keeps swimming, watching the stringy blue rocks pass by like they were exactly the way they were made to be. And I will stop it there.
Okay. Thanks, Morgan. That was lovely.
Thank
Felt
you.
indeed like a dream. Dream sequences felt quite like that.
Thank you.
So thanks for reading and thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Certainly. Next up, we have Erica Hunt, who is a nominee for poetry for her book, Jump the Clock, New and Selected Poems. Erica is a poet and essayist, and her work has appeared in numerous publications, including Bomb, Boundary 2, Brooklyn Rail, the Los Angeles Review of Books, Poetics Journal, and Tripwire. With Dawn Lundy Martin, Erica is the editor of an anthology of new writing by Black women, Letters to the Future. She has received awards from the Foundation for Contemporary Art, the Fund for Poetry, and the Jurassic Foundation, and is a past fellow of Duke University, University of Cape Town Program in Public Policy. And she teaches now at Brown University. Welcome, Erica.
Good evening. Thank you, Donna. And thank you also, Melanie, and to everyone who has made this evening possible. Also, it's an honor to be with everyone who has been nominated for honors and distinction with the Hurston Wright Foundation. Lovely thing. I'm going to read a few poems from Jump the Clock, starting with a sequence that is really a lamentation, and I hope to end on a higher note, but I'll start with Morning Birds. Here 1,000 birds dispute. The gun going off, the random backfire, who handled who, and who rose to be recognized, and how the body came to be fresh, fallen there, and why the girl was tackled, and how her wrist looked slight in handcuffs, and the exact nature of the orange pin, and the load glassing her eyes, and the load incalculable, and the incalculable load. Here 1,000 birds dispute the fresh blood on the sidewalk, the battle line, how it was drawn, and how were the sides chosen, and had there been a trial or any doubt, and if so, how it was framed. Did the shot hang in the air, and who was there to hear it? And here, hold this thought, 4 people are shot per day as xenon follows its element, or night its daytime shadow, as penumbra fades into solids and endures a rain of blows. There falls a rain of blows. Here 1,000 birds dispute what went wrong, the stopped clock, the orange pin, the random call, the fall from childhood, the fall, the incalculable fall, the fall incalculable. This time, to not let the familiar obsequies mask the obscenity, the twist our lips. The birds dispute these too, the televised worship of cinders it's riveting. Junk, heartache, abetted by hollow gestures. The birds' disputations grow louder, frantic against glass, stunned, splintered, and hushed in shadowy, honeyed innocence. The gun going off, the random backfire, appears as random as asking, who's got the gun? Who owns this gun? Who sold the gun? Who pulls the gun? And who does the gun let sleep? Another from this lamentation. Suspicious activity has an epigram. 43% of the people killed were not in the middle of committing a crime, but were stopped for suspicious activity. Arresting face. She abandoned the cloud and chose to go out on foot. She was missing a grin. She knocked at the wrong intersection. He defeated a matchstick. He crossed on the diagonal. They moved past an uncovered spot. They lost pump. He was bowing in erratic directions. She ran by spurious gloat. They were potential troublemakers, did not fit the turned-down dressing of the neighborhood. Speaking in concealed carry. He bolted out, cork dizzy, thinking free from the lockdown. She traced the body that refused to fit a grammar of disappearances. She studied how Black people getting excited in a manner different than others drives some people to blunt displays of panic and violence. She studied how Black people getting elected in a manner broader than others drives some people to blunt displays of panic and violence. Lamenting in an appropriate structure has rendered her hoarse from not screaming. She is blind from reading from inside her lids. I would show you where it happened on a map, but the cursor of the public's attention has vanished. Last poem, it's a poem from a different collection, also part of Jump the Clock. Reader, we were meant to meet and not disappear in the dredging. The edited ledgers omit antiphonal groans. Reader, you were meant to be legible, even in the failure to communicate, your will to resist, snatching defeat from the jaws of easy victory. The truth slips in as a figure of speech. Reader, step into my room. This page faces you. And what will I miss if you blink? What blots the ink, pens, and hems the imagination? What hides in the brackish backstories hostile to the wobbled word? What resists being pinned to the page? Reader, we are carbon and more. The exact degree of life is inestimable. Some of us chew ice and others suck chalk. Some crave salt before there is savor. Others can never be too full of sugar or bourbon, sucker punched and stunned by death's pugnacious brawl into dreamtime and song, extending both ends, night into day. Touch, reader, we were meant to touch, to exchange definitions and feed the pulse of language. I promise, if you step in, it will propel you, me, it, topple distinctions, ease, doubt, and belief, and all that in between. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. I will certainly be thinking about this one line, who does the gun let sleep? And I will be thinking about that for a good while to come. There is so much power there. Thank you so much for reading.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Ijeoma Oluo, who is a nominee in the nonfiction category for Mediocre, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America. Ijeoma is the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, So You Want to Talk About, and her work on race has been featured in The Guardian, The New York Times, and The Washington Post, among others. She was named to the 2021 Time 100 Next list and received the 2018 Feminist Humanist Award and the 2020 Harvard Humanist Award of the Harvard Humanist of the Year Award from the American Humanist Association. Thanks so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's really such an honor to read along with so many powerful voices. I've really been enjoying this. I'll go ahead and dive in. I'm going to read from chapter 7 of my book called Go Fucking Play, Football and the Fear of Black Men. It may surprise you to learn that American football, a sport today known for the Black athletes who showcase their physical speed and strength every Sunday, was created to be played by wealthy white men. There was a lot of money to be made after the Civil War and during the United States' violent expansion into Western territories in the 1800s. Families newly wealthy from the growth of railroads and trade, brought by the forced displacement of indigenous peoples, were looking at their own sons nervously. It had taken a lot of strength and force to build their wealth and power, and it would take more strength and force to maintain them. Would their rich, spoiled offspring have what it takes to grow an American empire? What could wealthy young men do to cultivate strength and aggression if they lived a life of ease? They could, perhaps, play a rough sport. The very foundation of football in this country comes out of fears of ruling class mediocrity and fears of the mediocrity of their own children. I'm sitting at a bookstore cafe in Washington, D.C., across a table from a noted author on the history of race and sport, Dave Zirin. It's his opening line for our conversation on football and Blackness, and it surprises me. But I shouldn't be surprised to be immediately learning from Zirin. He has written multiple best-selling books on sport and has been nominated for an NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Work, and is widely recognized within the sports world as an authority on sports history and sports labor issues. He's the guy to talk to about this. Like the mandate, Go West, Young Man, football was born out of muscular Christianity. Theodore Roosevelt, American cultural icon and the nation's 26th president, was, as we've seen, a big proponent of this doctrine. Teddy Roosevelt, he was like the prom king of this culture of toxic masculinity in sports and seeing sports as a substitute for the fight for empire and war, explains Zirin. American football had its beginnings in the Ivy League colleges, which were attended by young elites like Roosevelt. In its early days were so violent that dozens of student athletes died every year, nearly dooming the sport before it fully got off the ground. The Smithsonian detailed some of the injuries recorded during a particularly brutal college game in 1905. 4 concussions, 3 kicks in the head, 7 broken collarbones, 3 grave spinal injuries, 5 serious internal injuries, 3 broken arms, 4 dislocated shoulders, 4 broken noses, 3 broken shoulder blades, 3 broken jaws, 2 eyes gouged out, 1 player bitten and another knocked unconscious 3 times in the same game, 1 breastbone fractured, 1 ruptured intestine, and 1 player dazed. As outrage began to rise over the death toll of the sport, the New York Times placed football right alongside the lynching of Black Americans as our nation's 2 curable evils. Through the great effort of powerful defenders like Roosevelt, who claimed that, quote, it is mere unmanly folly to try to do away with the sport because the risk exists. Football supporters instead pressured colleges to form the NCAA to increase oversight and decrease deaths and serious injury. Modern-day American football has in many ways progressed and digressed racially along with American racial attitudes. While many would look at the Black millionaires it produces and think that the sport represents racial progress and Black success, it still also represents the ways in which racism and white supremacy have successfully moved out of the spotlight of violent racial terror and instead woven their way through the fabric of both the sport and society, existing and operating constantly, yet only making themselves more visible when the sport's integrity is directly threatened. Today, Black athletes make up the majority of popular American football team rosters, but that was not always the case. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was one of the early white players. I remember my mom showing me pictures of Daddy Bud from the early 1930s in his football uniform before a train accident crushed his foot and his professional prospects. My mom watched football in the tradition of her white family, so it did not carry the same complications for her that it carried for me, although perhaps it should have. That American football was invented, at least in part, to create and maintain a violent white male ideal, an ideal so brutal that it claimed dozens of promising young lives each year, is a history that should perhaps be just as troubling to white Americans as the current state of football is to Black Americans. The appeal of early football was white male dominance, a hierarchy that many in the sport tried to maintain by excluding Black players. Although football was eventually integrated, that integration stopped at the surface, and it hid all the ways in which the sport still worked to maintain the ugliest of white male power. The white male dominance that was first demonstrated in how white players tackled each other on the field was diverted to how they could control the physical power of Black men. Yes, the majority of players are now Black, but those calling the shots, the owners, the managers, the quarterbacks, are primarily white men. White fans shifted their relationship to football as well. They identify with the quarterback if they identify with a player at all. Why is it that fantasy football is so popular? Siren asked rhetorically. It's popular because, when it comes to football, fans identify with being an owner or a general manager, not with being a player. Why don't they identify with being a player? Well, a couple of reasons. One, race, without question, he explains. And two, because being an NFL player is to be a very specific kind of athlete. You're 6'3", 280 pounds. You're running 40 yards in 4.5 seconds. And fans, white fans, view these NFL players as half God, half chattel. As white America shifted its relationship with Black America, so did football shift its relationship to Black players. Although Black players are allowed to succeed for the few years that their bodies remain healthy, they are expected to be grateful for the same success that is costing them their bodies, and often, after repeated concussions, their minds. No guarantees are given players. They have no true security. And the moment they try to wield any of the power that their fame might bring them, the punishment is swift and sharp. And white fans rejoice in order restored. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Another powerful reading and shedding a whole new light on like this whole phenomenon of football. It's not a sport that I care too much about, but I really enjoyed hearing that and just seeing how how the ways in which we view the things we enjoy really change. So thank you so much for joining us and for reading. Next up, we have Carl Phillips, another nominee in poetry, and he was nominated for Pale Colors in a Tall Field. Carl is the author of 3 prose books and 16 books of poetry, including Wild is the Wind, which won the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, And his other honors include the 2021 Jackson Prize, the Aiken Taylor Award for Modern American Poetry, the Kingsley Tufts Award, a Lambda Literary Award, the Penn USA Award for Poetry and fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Library of Congress, and others. He teaches at Washington University in St. Louis. Welcome, Carl. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to be reading with everyone who's given such astonishing readings so far. And I'm sure it'll continue to be astonishing all the way through. And thank you, Donna, and thank you, Melanie. And I will just begin. This is called "I'm Being Asked to Be More Specific When It Comes to Longing." When the forest ended, so did the starflowers and wild ginger that for so long had kept us company. The clearing opened before us, a vast meadow of silverrod, each stem briefly an angled argument against despair, then only weeds, by a better name again, as incidental as the backdrop the ocean made just beyond the meadow. Like taking a horsewhip to a swarm of bees, that they might more easily disperse, we'd at last reach the point in twilight where twilight seems most a bowl designed to turn routinely, but as if by accident, half roughly over. Bells somewhere, the kind of bells that before being housed finally in their towers used to have to be baptized. Each was given to swing by or fall hushed inside of, accordingly, its own name. Bells, and then from the smudged edge of all that seemed to be left of what we'd called belief once, bodies, not of hunting birds, what we'd thought at first, but human bodies, in flight and lit from within as if by ruin, or triumph maybe, at having made out of ruin a light, something useful by which, having skimmed the water, to search the meadow now for ourselves inside it, where, yes, though we shook in our nakedness, we lay naked as we'd been taught to do. When afraid, what is faith but to make a gift of yourself? Give, and you shall receive. This poem is called "Blow It Back." Don't think I have anything to say about it, so I'll just read it. Blow it back. How they woke finally in a bed of ferns, horsetail ferns. How they died singing. All night, meanwhile, as if somehow the fox's mouth that so much of this life has amounted to had briefly unshut itself, and the moth that's trapped there, unharmed, gone free, a snow fell. The snow-filled street seemed a toppled column, like the one in the mind called doubt, or that other one, persuasion, the broken one, in 3 clean pieces. Well, it's morning now. Out back, the bamboo bows and stiffens. Thoughts in a wind. Thoughts like, but nobody's saying it. Nobody, I think, knows me better by now than you do. Or like, the bamboo bowing, stiffening, seems like nothing so much as, in this light, competing forms of betrayal that, given time, must surely cancel each other out. Close your eyes. Patience. Wait. Maybe less the foliage than the promise of it. Less that shame exists, maybe, than that the world keeps saying it does. Know it, hold on tight to it, as if the world were rumor, how every rumor rings true lately. When I'm ashamed, I make a point of reminding myself what is shame, but to have let it show that variety of love that goes hand in hand with having wished to please and in pleasing for a while belong. So shame can, like love, be an eventual way through. There's a minor chord sparrows make with doves that's not the usual business. It's not sad at all, any of it. this always waiting for what I've always waited for, this not being able to find what's missing, some shape, a name, this body neither antlered nor hooved, brave too, this body, unapologetic. Okay, there are two more poems. This one is super short. It's called Overheard Under a Dark Enchantment. Compassion first, we were told. And if that won't work, compassion's shadow, pity, to smooth what's rough. We find just holding the victim's hand lately has been exactly enough. Told you it was short. All right, and I'll finish with this poem called Ghost Choir. Ghost Choir. What injures the hive injures the bee, says Marcus Aurelius. I say, not wanting to hurt another this late should maybe more than count still as a form of love. Be wild, bewilder. Not that they hadn't, of course, known unkindnesses and been themselves unkind. When the willow's leaves back again unfold all along their branches, the branches routinely in turn brushing then lifting away from the pond's face, it's too late. Last night, I doubted, as I've not doubted myself in years. Knowing a thing seemed worthless, next to knowing the difference between many things, the fox from the hounds, persuasion from the trust required to fall asleep beside a stranger, who I am, and how I treated you, and how you feel. So that it almost seemed they'd either forgotten or agreed without saying so to pretend they had. Did you know there's an actual plant called honesty for its seed pods, how you can see straight through? Though they'd been told the entire grove would die eventually, they refused to believe it. The face in sleep, like a wish, wasted. To the wings at first a slight unsteadiness, then barely any. What if forgetting's not like that? Instead, stampeding, panicked, just a ghost choir of legends and rumors, of the myths forged from memory, what's true and isn't, that we make of ourselves and even worse, of others. Not the all but muscular ache, the inner sweep of woundedness. No, not tonight. Say the part again about the bluer flower, black at the edges. I've always loved that part. Skull of an ox, from which a smattering of stars keeps rising. How they decided never to use surrender as a word again. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Carl. That was lovely. You have me chewing on so many different things here. One is, and I wrote it down as, what is faith but to make a gift of yourself? And I think Erica had it a little differently. So, but I'm thinking. And also, there's a minor chord sparrows make with doves. And I'm thinking about that because you listen to the birds, you hear all the music, but I never quite think of it that way. So thank you so much. Glad you're able to join us. And so our seventh and final reader for the evening is Alice Randall. She is a fiction writer and she is up for Black Bottom Saints. Alice is the first Black woman to pen a #1 country hit as co-writer of X's and O's, An American Girl, which celebrates Aretha Franklin. And she's a professor and writer in residence at Vanderbilt University in the Department of African American Studies. And she holds an honorary doctorate from Fisk University and a BA from Harvard. Welcome, Alice, and thanks for joining us.
Donna, thank you, and thank Hurston Wright. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm in Nashville, and I live in the very neighborhood where Zora Neale Hurston lived, in Black Bottom, downtown by the river. So I'm going to be very brief. These are the Black Bottom Saints of Detroit. I was born in one Black Bottom, and I now live in another, and I'll jump right in. This is Ziggy Johnson, who you see on the cover and overhead talking. The factory folk, the breadwinners, drove the Black city. Black Detroit knew this. We gave the factory folk who worked in the automobile plants their proper respect. We loved those men who did that shift work that meant 8 out of 10 Black families in Detroit owned the home they lived in and could afford to go out to a club to hear live music any night they chose. Our breadwinners built this city. We remember when River Rouge ran 24/7. 3 shifts a day at the plants meant the show bars had 2 shows on Sunday and late shows every night, sometimes at 2 a.m. for those who got off the late shift. That was the opportunity that created Caramel Camelot. All Black Detroit audiences were fire. They brought a rare light and a heat that rated Black achievement and performance by a Black yardstick. It was nothing for a breadwinner or a breadwinner's wife to go to 52 shows a year. It was unusual but not rare to go to even 150 shows a year. Some breadwinners went to over 250 shows in a given year. The breadwinners heard so much excellent music, they became experts. And the more expert they became, the more everybody wanted to play Detroit. It was a self-perpetuating cauldron of sepia excellence. I stirred that pot. And I have to say, this reading tonight is a self-perpetuating cauldron of sepia excellence. I'm going to read this last short reading from, there are 61 saints in the Black Bottom Saints. It's a secular Saints Day book written by one Ziggy Johnson in the 60s. And this is something that he wrote about his aunt, a real Black woman called Sadie Pryor from Black Bottom Saints. She was president of the PTA. She was principal of Spencer Bibbs Elementary. She helped found a Black YWCA and the C.B. Nelson Daniels Chapter 172 of the Eastern Star and was installed as a worthy matron. She was a national leader of Girl Scouts. If I seem proud, it's because I am, and she always played humble. Sadie knew Black girls made miracles because she had been a Black girl making miracles. Every day at every club, she worked alongside Black women who had been, but not acknowledged as being, shamans. Some came from hoodoo, some from conjure, some from voodoo, but they stood on the shores of colored girl mystery, that shrouded territory where misery is converted to mystery and power. Watching Sadie work with her club women sisters to finally win in 1953, a beach that welcomed Black kids to swim without also winning lifeguards that the white beaches had, started me on a road of discovery. Watching her continue to work against well-moneyed, elected, racist men, eager to invite Black bodies into danger, took me further down that discovery road as I heard about her grinding city commissioners down with silly questions, administrative technicalities, and treacle-sweet pleasantness. She had mother wit. It took mother wit to finally get the lifeguards the colored kids needed and deserved. Girls and women will be increasingly the key to maintaining Black identity as we Black folk begin to enter new, predominantly white spaces with new difficulties and new dangers. Integration brought evil as well as good. Sadie saw this, told me over drinks at the Sir John Hotel. We need the magic box of your dancing school to intensify their soul selves, their own inner magic box. She clutched the pearls at her neck when she said this next. A string of pearls can be a shield. A dance school can be a lifeboat. So much gets diluted when we enter white space.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So much gets diluted when we enter white space. That's a beautiful line to end on. Thank you so much, Alice, and thank you to all the readers. It was a pleasure sitting here and listening to all your work. And there is, I hope that as we read more and we hear more from all the nominees, that we won. Not just pay attention, but also support these writers. and purchase their books. Certainly, I think Melanie will probably talk a little bit more about where you can purchase. But thank you so much to everybody for reading, and thank you to all of you who tuned in to listen to us this evening. Melanie?
Thank you, Donna, so much for moderating tonight. I have had a few computer issues today, so hopefully my closing will go a little smoother than my opening. The readings tonight were absolutely phenomenal. Carl used the word astonishing, and yeah, I agree with that. I think so. So please, everyone who is tuning in tonight, thank you, first of all, for being here. But please support these writers, both from our readers from last night and tonight. If you loved what you heard, then please support and buy a book. I encourage people to go to their local independent bookstore. We have partnered with Loyalty Books. And Loyalty is a woman-owned independent bookstore in DC and also in Maryland. So please support the independent bookstores and support these incredible Black writers. I do also want to give a bit of a shout out to our sponsors because our Legacy Award this year, some of you who are familiar with it, we're usually in person, but it is going to be a virtual experience this year, but it is free. And it is free to anyone who wants to join in. There is still time to register. It's going to happen tomorrow night at 7 p.m. But thank you to our sponsors, which is why we're able to give it free. Our Writer Circle, inaugural Writer Circle this year, along with our Amazon Literary Partnership, Penguin Random House, HarperCollins Publishers, Literary Hub, Graham Holdings, and ESPN's The Undefeated. So truly, because of them, we are able to offer free. So like I said, if you haven't registered yet, then get on that and come, because you got to see just a little bit of the amazing talent that we are going to celebrate and honor tomorrow night. And yeah, I just am thrilled to be here and able to share in this amazing work. So thank you to everyone, and hopefully we will see you tomorrow. Take care.